Maurice Carter sat quietly on the worn-out recliner in his small apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. The evening sun cast a warm glow through the blinds, but nothing felt comforting anymore. Not since he lost his job 6 months ago. Once the proud assistant manager at a respected logistics company, he'd been laid off when the company downsized. Since then, he'd been applying for jobs non-stop, anything to keep food on the table. But interviews never called back, and savings were drying up fast. His wife, Tasha, barely spoke to him now unless it was to remind him of bills or mock his manhood. Her words used to be soft. Now they cut. She never missed a chance to let her friends in on the jokes. Maurice could feel himself slipping, not just financially, but emotionally, physically, and mentally. Tasha used to adore Maurice. She once bragged about his ambition, how he treated her like a queen. But now, surrounded by friends who flaunted their partners' promotions and paychecks, she seemed embarrassed by her husband. She started hosting her girls, Shonda, Brielle, and Keek, every Friday night for wine, loud music, and endless laughter. Maurice would retreat to the bedroom or step out. But tonight, his head throbbed too badly to move. He stayed on the recliner, pretending to scroll through his phone while they chatted in the kitchen. "Girl, how's unemployment be doing?" Keek joked, not even whispering. "Still applying for opportunities, like it's a side hustle." The others cackled. Tasha didn't stop them. In fact, she added, "I should record his pity-party posture. It's like living with Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh." Maurice flinched but stayed silent. He was used to being humiliated now. But tonight, something felt different in his chest, tightness, like a hand gripping his heart. At first, he thought it was stress. Maybe the sting of her words triggered a panic attack. But within seconds, the sharp, stabbing pain radiated from his chest to his arm. His breathing became shallow, and sweat dripped down his face. Maurice tried to rise, but his legs felt like jelly. He collapsed to his knees, one hand gripping the coffee table. A faint groan escaped his lips, barely audible over the sound of laughter and Beyoncé blasting from the Bluetooth speaker. "Tasha," he whispered, his vision blurring. She glanced over, annoyed. "You good?" she called lazily. "Is being dramatic again," she added, turning to her friends. "I swear he acts like he's the only man to ever lose a job." Brielle giggled and pulled out her phone. "Nah, sis, get this on camera. Look at him." The rest followed suit, phones in hand, laughing as they zoomed in on a man gasping for air on his living room floor. Maurice's world tilted. Sounds became muffled. His heart pounded like a war drum in his ears. His vision dimmed, the room spinning like a slow carousel. He saw their faces, laughing, filming, unmoved. Tasha was leaning against the wall, holding her wine glass, smirking like it was all a stage performance. One of her friends said, "You should post that to TikTok with the caption, 'When your man is broke and bored.'" More laughter. Nobody moved to help. Not even a call to 911. Maurice tried to speak again, but his voice was gone. All he could do was collapse completely, his body falling sideways, half on the carpet, half against the couch. The last thing he saw was the ceiling fan spinning slowly above him, its blades a blur, his thoughts even blurrier. Then, blackness. Next door, Mrs. Daniels, a retired nurse in her 70s, had been sitting on her porch when she heard a strange thump and muffled yelling. She'd always liked Maurice, polite, respectful, always offered to carry her groceries. She stood, walked to the door, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. She could hear the music but also sensed something was wrong. On instinct, she called out Maurice's name. Still nothing. That's when she made the 911 call. "I don't know what's happening, but I think someone inside may need help." Meanwhile, inside, the laughter continued, until the sirens grew louder. Tasha's smile faded as red and blue lights lit up the windows. Is that for us?" she asked, confused. Her friends looked out the window, wine glasses in hand, and suddenly, no one was laughing anymore. The paramedics didn't knock. They entered with urgency, guided by Mrs. Daniels, who'd insisted something was wrong. "He's right there," she pointed once they stepped inside. The moment their eyes landed on Maurice, they dropped to their knees beside him. "Is unconscious. Pulse is weak," one of them said, already pulling out equipment. The women in the kitchen stood frozen. Tasha's glass nearly slipped from her hand. Shonda tried to hide her phone, still recording. "Wait, he's really not playing," Brielle whispered, horrified. "Oh my God." But it was too late for whispers. The paramedics were already shouting codes and working frantically. One said sharply to Tasha, "How long has he been like this?" Tasha stammered, I don't know. He was just sitting there." The paramedic's expression turned cold. "You didn't think to call for help?" Silence. Only the beeping from the defibrillator filled the room now. Maurice regained consciousness for only a moment during the ride to the hospital. Tubes were in his nose. A mask pressed to his face. He felt floating, confused, scared. He saw the ambulance ceiling and the focused face of the EMT hovering above him. "Hang in there, Mr. Carter. We've got you." That voice, steady, urgent, was the only warmth he felt. No wife, no hand holding his, just the roar of sirens and the weight of betrayal. As the sirens faded into the distance, the guilt began to flood Tasha's heart. She sat on the edge of the couch, head in her hands, the laughter from earlier echoing like a bad dream. Her friends made excuses and slipped out, one by one. By the time the apartment was quiet again, she was alone with nothing but the wine bottle and her shame. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what the EMTs had suspected. Maurice had suffered a moderate heart attack brought on by extreme stress. If he'd gotten help even 5 minutes later, the cardiologist told the attending nurse, we might have lost him. That line haunted Mrs. Daniels, who had come to check on him. She waited in the lobby, praying he'd make it through. When Tasha finally arrived, hours later, the staff didn't greet her with warmth. A nurse pulled her aside. "He's stable, but we have a report from EMS that his collapse was mocked and filmed. Were you there?" Tasha froze. "We'll be including this in the incident report," the nurse added, her tone firm. Because if he hadn't been found in time, this could have been a fatal case of neglect. Tasha blinked rapidly. For the first time, it sank in. This wasn't just about jokes anymore. She could have let her husband die. Maurice spent 3 days in the hospital. He barely spoke to Tasha when she visited. Her once glamorous appearance had faded. No makeup, no styled hair, just guilt in her eyes. She brought flowers and his favorite lemon pie, but he didn't touch them. He stayed out the window, heart monitor beeping steadily beside him. "I didn't know it was that serious," she said one afternoon. "You weren't saying anything." "I thought." He cut her off with a weak shake of his head. "You laughed, Tasha. You and your friends laughed." His voice cracked, but his words were firm. "You filmed me like I was a joke, while I was dying." Tasha started to cry, but Maurice looked away. He'd already done enough crying on his own, alone, in that apartment, in the silence between one rejection email and the next. His chest hurt, but not from the heart attack anymore. Back at home, things were changing. Word had started spreading in the building. Mrs. Daniels, bless her heart, had told a few trusted neighbors. Someone from across the hall had seen the paramedics, and stories started floating. Eventually, a clip of the incident, taken by one of Tasha's friends, leaked online. Whether by accident or spite, no one knew. But the internet was merciless. Twitter exploded with outrage. They laughed while he was dying. "This man deserves better." Within hours, the clip went viral. Local news picked it up, and soon Maurice's name was trending. Tasha's job, where she worked as an HR assistant, called her in for questioning. "This kind of behavior reflects poorly on the company," her supervisor said flatly. By the end of the week, she was suspended without pay. The same friends who once laughed beside her stopped responding to texts altogether. Her perfect circle was crumbling. Maurice returned home 2 weeks later, but nothing felt like home anymore. The couch still had the indentation where he collapsed. The coffee table still had a faint smudge where his hand had gripped the edge. He looked at it with quiet disgust. Tasha had tried to tidy up, new throw pillows, fresh candles, but the apartment still smelled like shame. She greeted him with open arms, but he walked past her slowly, like a man stepping into a museum filled with ghosts. That night, he slept on the small guest bed in the second room, door locked. He didn't eat her food. He didn't speak unless necessary. Maurice had always been gentle, forgiving, but something inside him had snapped. He wasn't bitter. He was just done. The viral video kept spreading. Podcasts debated it. Facebook groups tore into Tasha. Some even identified her and her friends, tagging their employers. Shonda had been a school counselor, fired within days. Brielle lost a brand deal. Keek deactivated all her social media accounts. But Maurice didn't care about revenge. He stayed offline, recovering physically while trying to heal the wounds that didn't show up on an EKG. A local men's health nonprofit reached out, inviting him to share his story. At first, he declined. "Ain't nothing to share," he mumbled. But after some thought, he realized that maybe his pain had a purpose. Maybe some other man out there, jobless, humiliated, disrespected, needed to know they weren't alone. So, he agreed. He started small. One interview with a local podcast. The host, Donnell, gave him space to speak. "What hurt most?" Donnell asked. Maurice paused. "Not the chest pain. Not even the filming. What hurt the most was knowing the woman I built a life with saw me as less than human. That I didn't matter enough to help." The clip from that interview struck a chord. Viewers shared it with comments like, "This broke me, and I see my father in this man." Within weeks, Maurice became an unexpected voice in the growing movement around emotional abuse against men. His quiet pain became a loud message, and people were listening. Tasha watched the rise from the sidelines. She tried to post a tearful apology video, but the internet wasn't buying it. "Now you're crying," one commenter said. "Where were the tears when he was dying on your carpet?" She tried to attend one of Maurice's small speaking events, but he had her turned away at the door. "This is for healing," he told the organizer, "not performance." The humiliation stung, but she knew she'd earned it. Her friends had all moved on or turned inward, nursing their own public wounds. But Tasha's pain wasn't from lost followers or job opportunities. It was a growing realization that she had broken something too precious to ever get back. Maurice kept growing, not as a celebrity, but as a man finding strength again. He took a job with a nonprofit, helping men access mental health resources, job retraining, and legal aid. He met brothers coming out of prison, fathers in custody battles, and young men on the brink of giving up. He listened. He shared. And slowly, his smile returned. It wasn't as bright, but it was real. He still had his scars, both physical and emotional, but now they served a purpose. Every night, he went home to that same apartment, still technically shared with Tasha, but he made plans quietly. He was saving money, setting goals, and watching the calendar. He knew what had to come next. Healing didn't mean staying. It was a Thursday evening when Maurice finally visited his old job's career center. The logistics company that let him go had launched a reentry program for former employees who had been laid off. He wasn't expecting much, but when he walked in, one of the directors recognized him from a podcast. "You're the guy who survived the heart attack, right? The one whose wife," he trailed off, respectful. Maurice simply nodded. The director looked impressed. "We've been following your story. We'd be lucky to have you back." 3 weeks later, Maurice was rehired, not just in his former position, but promoted to regional logistics coordinator. It came with better pay, full benefits, and a sign-on bonus. For the first time in a long while, he stood tall, not because of how others saw him, but because he saw himself again. Tasha noticed the change instantly. Maurice wasn't angry. He was polite, calm, but distant. He didn't argue, didn't linger. He started dressing better, waking up earlier, and keeping a separate bank account. When she asked where he was going in a press shirt and blazer, he said, "To do what a man does. Provide for himself." There was no venom, just finality. That night, she scrolled through old pictures of them laughing on vacations, holding hands at cookouts, posing in front of their first apartment. None of it could undo what she'd let happen. She had mocked the very man who had once shielded her through car repossessions, helped her mom with rent, and paid off her student loan. She had filmed his lowest moment, and now she couldn't even reach him. One afternoon, Maurice came home to find Tasha sitting on the couch with a piece of paper. "I wrote something," she said quietly. He stood, watching. "It's not an excuse. It's an apology. Real one." She slid the letter across the table. He didn't touch it. "I'll read it if I feel like it," he said. "But Tasha, we're done." Her lips quivered. "Can't we fix it?" He shook his head. "You didn't just break us. You broke me, and I had to fix myself without you." He walked into the bedroom, shutting the door gently. That silence spoke louder than any shouting match ever could. 2 months later, Maurice moved out. He had found a modern one-bedroom condo in the south end of Charlotte, walking distance from work. Clean walls, quiet mornings, peace. On moving day, Mrs. Daniels helped him load boxes. "Proud of you, baby," she smiled. "I told you, good men don't stay down long." As he hugged her goodbye, Maurice felt a lightness in his chest. Not because he'd escaped pain, but because he'd grown through it. Tasha watched from the window, tears soaking the apology letter she once thought would fix everything. But the damage wasn't in words. It was in choices. And Maurice had chosen to walk toward a new life, one without her in it. Months later, Maurice stood on stage at a national men's conference in Atlanta. The crowd applauded as he shared his story, not just of betrayal, but survival. "I'm not here because of what was done to me," he said. "I'm here because I refused to let that moment define me. Pain tried to take me out, but purpose brought me back." The crowd rose to its feet, clapping through tears. In the back of the room, a young man wiped his eyes and whispered, "That man saved my life." Maurice saw him, nodded, and smiled. Because now, he was the one recording hope. Back in Charlotte, Tasha had quietly resigned from her job and kept a low profile. Public judgment faded eventually, but what lingered was the emptiness. The silence in the apartment was unbearable. Every corner reminded her of what she'd taken for granted. The wine glasses stayed packed away. Friday nights were quiet now. No friends, no laughter, no Maurice. She applied for jobs but struggled to get interviews. Her name still floated around online, linked to the video. But even more painful than career setbacks was the realization that she had lost a man who truly loved her, all because she let her pride and ego make a mockery of his pain. Regret, now, was her only roommate. Maurice, meanwhile, had found new joy in simplicity. He'd taken up running, slowly at first, careful with his recovery. He joined a community health group and spent Saturday mornings mentoring young men. His story had opened doors, but he wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing peace. And every day, he caught a little more of it. His condo was filled with natural light, fresh air, and quiet music. No more yelling. No more tension. When he cooked dinner, it was for himself, seasoned with gratitude. And when he looked in the mirror, he no longer saw a broken man. He saw a survivor, a leader, a man worthy of respect, especially his own. At one of the nonprofit workshops he helped organize, Maurice met a young woman named Nina, a trauma counselor who had been following his story. They connected over shared passions and real conversations. She didn't care about what happened in the past, only about the man standing in front of her now. She was kind but bold, soft-spoken but strong. Over time, they started grabbing coffee after events, then lunch, then long evening walks by the waterfront. Maurice was cautious, not because he feared love, but because he now understood its weight. Nina never rushed him. She simply showed up with patience. And for the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a paycheck, not as a performance, but as a person. One night, as they sat watching the city lights from a rooftop patio, Maurice shared something he hadn't told anyone. "The day I collapsed," he said, voice low, "I didn't just feel pain. I felt worthless, like I could disappear and no one would care." Nina reached over, held his hand. "But you didn't disappear," she whispered. "You became a lighthouse. That light, it saved more people than you'll ever know." He didn't cry, but his eyes glistened. It wasn't sorrow. It was healing. That night, he walked her to her car and kissed her forehead gently. It wasn't a movie ending. It was better. It was real. Meanwhile, Tasha finally watched the full podcast interview Maurice did months ago. Alone on the couch, she paused and replayed the part where he said, "You didn't just break us. You broke me." She wept, clutching the apology letter she'd rewritten 10 times but never sent. She realized that some mistakes don't come with do-overs, only lessons. Maurice's rise wasn't fueled by revenge, but by resilience. And though she'd been the one to break him, he was the one who rebuilt himself stronger. The only role left for her was to accept the consequences and live with the memory of the man who gave her everything, until she gave him nothing. Months later, Maurice received an unexpected email from the city's health and wellness department. They were launching a new mental health initiative for Black men in underserved communities, and they wanted him to be a founding voice. "Your story resonates," the message read. "We believe your voice can change lives." Maurice sat with it, humbled. He wasn't a therapist. He wasn't famous. But he was real, and real was enough. He accepted the offer, and soon he was speaking at schools, hosting workshops, and helping shape policy focused on emotional abuse, unemployment trauma, and recovery after public shame. The same man once laughed at on the internet was now building systems to protect others from that very pain. He also visited his parents' grave one Sunday morning, something he hadn't done in a while. "You raised me to be better than what I became," he said softly, setting down a bouquet. "But I made it back. I'm standing tall again." The cemetery was quiet, the breeze warm. He stayed for an hour, just thinking about his past, about Tasha, about survival. Then he smiled faintly. "I'm good now, Ma. I'm really good." As he walked away, a new sense of peace followed him. Not the kind given by others, but the kind earned through fire and forgiveness. 1 year to the day after the heart attack, Maurice stood on stage at a televised health summit. This time, he wasn't alone. Nina sat in the front row, smiling with quiet pride. Behind him was a screen showing statistics about emotional neglect, heart disease in Black men, and the power of community support. But Maurice didn't open with numbers. He opened with truth. "I'm not a victim. I'm a man who was broken in public and chose to heal in the open. I hope my story helps someone realize your worth isn't tied to your job, your bank account, or even how others treat you. You matter, even when they laugh, especially when they laugh." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, crying, witnessing transformation. As cameras flashed and applause echoed, Maurice spotted a woman quietly slipping out the side door. Tasha. She hadn't made her presence known, and he never looked directly at her. But he saw her, and in that moment, he felt no anger, just clarity. Some people come into your life to teach you how to love. Others teach you how to love yourself. She had done both, in the most painful way. He said a silent goodbye and turned back to the light, where his future waited. That night, Maurice sat on his balcony, watching stars blink over the city skyline. He held a cup of tea in one hand and Nina's hand in the other. The world was quiet. No sirens, no shouting, no laughter at his expense. Just peace. He had survived what should have broken him. He had lost a marriage, endured betrayal, and stared death in the face, only to come back stronger, louder, and more alive than ever. Not because someone saved him, but because he chose himself. And in the end, that choice changed everything. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.